10. Cranky koala. A woman who saw a cute koala walking on the side of the road in Queensland, Australia, got a rude awakening when she suddenly approached the wild animal and didn't get the welcoming response she expected. In a viral TikTok, she crouched down and talked to the marsupial before reaching out for cuddles. The koala became alarmed and charged at her, causing her to lose her balance and fall backward to the ground as she tried to get away. A full-fledged attack soon followed, while the person filming the video just laughed. Koalas are undeniably cute and look very cuddly, but just like any other wild creature, they're prone to aggression when threatened. Based on her lack of caution, some commenters believed that the woman was an American, or at least not from Australia, since most locals are well aware of the dangers associated with approaching koalas. 9. A violent escape. In 2007, a large male silverback gorilla named Boquito escaped from his cage at a zoo in Rotterdam. He then went on a rampage and violently attacked a 57-year-old woman from behind, dragging her on the ground and biting her over 100 different times. She was quickly rushed to the hospital with a broken arm and wrist, along with some other serious injuries. Speaking with the Dutch Telegraph newspaper, she said that Boquito put all his weight on top of her. In the moment, she truly thought she was going to die. Ironically, Boquito was the woman's favorite animal in the whole zoo. She was such a big fan of the guy that she visited almost daily. Employees noticed her smiling and making direct eye contact with the gorilla, and told her to avoid eye contact, letting her know that some primates perceive it as a threat or challenge when smiled at. But the woman insisted she and Boquito had a special bond and deeply understood each other. Even after the attack, she said he was still her favorite animal. 3 others were hurt during the rampage as zoo visitors scrambled to get away from the angry gorilla, who ran at full speed down guest pathways. Employees eventually managed to lock him in a restaurant and shot him with a tranquilizer dart before dragging him back to the enclosure. This wasn't the first time Boquito escaped either. Back in 2004, he broke out of his cage at a zoo in Berlin. Thankfully, in this case, he was quickly captured and returned to his exhibit, and nobody was harmed. 8. Maniacal monkeys. A monkey trainer in China's Jiangxi province got an unexpected taste of his own medicine one day in 2011 when an animal in his care turned on in the middle of a street performance. The man was known for being cruel toward monkeys, mainly by whipping them if they disobeyed his commands. When one of them got fed up with the abuse, he lunged at his trainer and grabbed at his hair. Photos of the incident show the man grimacing as if in excruciating pain. The trainer tried to grab his whip to discipline the monkey, who snatched a stick off the ground to keep fighting his instructor. They squared off with their weapons in a stick-to-stick match as a crowd of witnesses laughed. Hopefully, it made the man rethink his training methods. In another instance of primates lashing out at a human, a tourist pushed a monkey off the fence he was sitting on in Fujian province back in 2018. The monkey was heard crying in footage captured of the act, but he quickly got back up and went straight for the man's face. He then chased the tourist into a temple nearby. Another monkey then joined in on the attack, and the pair made another go at the man's face before visitors drove the primates away. He was left with some nasty scratches, but not very many people felt all too bad for him. 7. Big game hunter pays big price. 46-year-old Jose Monsalves and a friend traveled from Argentina to Namibia in 2017 to hunt some big game living on a private wildlife reserve. The pair were out with 3 others when an elephant charged at them and trampled Monsalves. By the time a group member was able to shoot, he was dead. Just months before, a 51-year-old South African hunter named Theonis Botha had a fatal run-in with an elephant in Zimbabwe. his group met a herd of the creatures, some of whom were pregnant, and 3 of them charged at the hunters. Botha shot one of them, and a 4th elephant also ran toward the group. She lifted Botha up with her trunk and slammed him on the ground when one of the hunters shot at her, causing her to fall on top of him and crush him. Botha's death came as sad news to the trophy hunting community, where he was well known for leading rich clients on hunts. Even some who weren't a big fan of his lifestyle conceded that any human death is nothing to laugh about. But some animal lovers and activists felt no sympathy for Botha, chalking the incident up to a well-deserved example of karma. 6. Fatal feline encounter. In early 2018, a human head was found on a private reserve in South Africa with a rifle laying nearby. At first, authorities thought it belonged to a park employee, but the worker was found alive. They were still struggling to identify the person, how they died, and where the rest of the body was when the gruesome discovery made headlines. Police thought that he was most likely a poacher, and that a wild animal had killed and eaten the majority of him. In recent years, the region with Kruger National Park has become well known for rhinoceros poaching, but the severed head was found in an area where lions are more common. The man was later identified as 50-year-old David Baloyi, who had crossed into South Africa with 2 other hunters from Mozambique to hunt. They tracked a pride of lions when Baloyi's friends heard him screaming for help. The hunters panicked and left their partner and guns behind to go back to Mozambique. They told Baloyi's family he had been devoured by the big cats, and his sister confirmed his identity. Identifying the brutally slain man was only one piece of the puzzle. Investigators opened an inquiry into the tragedy in hopes of learning more about what happened leading up to Baloyi's gruesome death. But all signs pointed toward the men foolishly deciding to hunt for lions at night. One of them paid for it with their life. 5. Barreled by a buffalo. Claude Kleinhans was a celebrity in the trophy hunting world with over 30 years of experience hunting big game in Africa. He met an ironic end in 2018, though, when his hunting party killed a buffalo in the Limpopo province of South Africa. The 54-year-old and his group members were loading the creature onto a truck when another buffalo from the same herd suddenly charged at them, puncturing his groin with its horn and piercing his femoral artery. He died almost instantly. In some ways, the attack wasn't all too surprising. Buffalo are known for being territorial, especially when it comes to protecting their herd. They're also massive, weighing up to 1,300 pounds or 590 kilograms. But it was shocking that a hunter as experienced as Kleinhans would have let down his guard in a situation like this. Throughout his career, he led big game hunts for high-paying clients through his company, Guela Safaris. Customers could choose from dozens of animals to kill. Some of the creatures had a fee listed next to them, including zebras, which came with a $1,500 trophy fee, and giraffes, which came at a larger cost of $2,850. Other species had no specified fee, including buffalo, which were part of an exclusive special package. One thing's for sure, Kleinhans died doing what he loved, even if it was a questionable activity. 4. An ironic plunge. While hunting in Oregon's remote Maury Mountains, 69-year-old Gary Heater shot a large elk in 2016. He began towing it up a steep hill with his ATV when the vehicle flipped out of nowhere, making him fall backwards and land on top of the animal's antlers. Heater was impaled and badly injured. Members of his hunting team gave first aid and called for help. But because of how far away from civilization they were, they knew Gary would need to be flown to the hospital. They did their best to get his bleeding under control in the meantime. The group was still waiting for the chopper when a deputy got there. He observed that Heater was conscious and responsive, but was going into shock. When the helicopter arrived, the pilot had trouble finding a clearing big enough to land. He eventually found a place, but the group had to carry their friend half a mile, 0.8 kilometers away to reach the aircraft. Luckily, they got Heater loaded onto the chopper before fuel levels became an issue. None of Heater's organs were damaged beyond repair, although he injured some of his back muscles. If he had landed even slightly in other directions, things could have turned out much worse. 3. Confronted by a crocodile. 44-year-old Scott Van Zyl mysteriously vanished in 2017 during a safari hunt in Zimbabwe. None of the other hunters realized anything was amiss until his hunting dogs returned to camp later that day without him. It was surprising because Zyl was an experienced outdoorsman. But it was clear to his friends that something went terribly wrong when they found his rifle inside his truck. With him nowhere in sight, a large-scale search ensued. Group members passed out flyers to the public. Helicopters flew over the reserve, and others looked for Van Zyl from the ground. Their first clue to his whereabouts came when they saw his footprints leading up to the bank of the Limpopo River and his backpack nearby. It was then that police started to suspect Van Zyl had been eaten by crocodiles. It was a reasonable theory, considering how 3 people had already been killed by reptiles that month alone. The month before, the remains of an 8-year-old boy were found inside a crocodile after he went missing. During their search, officers shot 2 crocodiles and found what appeared to be human remains inside their stomachs. DNA tests confirmed that they were, in fact, responsible for the missing hunter's death. 2. Eaten alive. In 2018, a group of poachers broke into a South African private game reserve to hunt rhinos. They encountered an angry pride of lions, and by the time investigators found them, only a skull and a piece of someone's pelvis remained. So little of the hunters was left that law enforcement couldn't even say with certainty how many people had been killed. They found 3 pairs of boots and 3 pairs of gloves, indicating that the big cats feasted on about 3 men. The first sign that something was wrong came during the early morning, when an anti-poaching dog alerted his handler to something unusual. Lions could be heard nearby, but the handler didn't investigate since it was a normal time of day to hear lion activity. Near the remains, officers found hunting gear as well as wire clippers, which are usually a telltale sign of someone being a poacher. Law enforcement then launched a ground and air search for any possible survivors, but failed to find any. The park's owner, Nick Fox, told press that the poachers' deaths were undoubtedly tragic, but that the incident should serve as a warning sign that going on illegal hunts is risky and can be life-threatening. It's unclear whether detectives ever identified who the men were, or even if they concluded how many were eaten. 1. A primate's payback. When villagers in southwestern India's Karnataka state complained about a bonnet macaque bothering children in search of food, local wildlife authorities hatched a plan to trap him. Their first step was to drive 3 cars toward the monkey to send him off in a specific direction with the help of civilians. Instead of fleeing from one of the cars, the monkey instead charged at the driver and bit him in the hand. The man ran off, but it was far from the last time they would cross paths. From then on, the macaque followed and attacked the villager every time he came into view. When he took refuge in his vehicle, the creature charged right at it and ripped off the cloth covering. His rickshaw was rendered undrivable, leaving him unable to do his job properly, and he sustained painful injuries. He was also worried about the safety of his young children, often leaving him afraid to go home in case an unwelcome visitor followed. Wildlife officials finally caught the monkey and relocated him over 13 miles, 22 kilometers away to another forest. The man thought the torment was finally over, but he was mistaken. Less than a week later, his arch-nemesis reappeared, having traveled all the way back to the village just to go after him. When the man learned the monkey was back, he went into literal hiding and begged authorities for help. Wildlife officials quickly recaptured the creature and once again relocated it to another forest. This time, the macaque stayed away for good.
10. Sarah Lilly. At least 20 residents were displaced from their homes in early 2023 when an uncontrolled blaze ripped through an apartment complex in rural Springville, New York. Luckily, the tenants escaped without injury, but the building and everything in it were completely destroyed, leaving at least 4 families with nothing as they grappled with their material losses and mourned the deaths of their beloved pets. And in a region infamous for its frigid winters and lake-effect snow, the timing of the fire couldn't have been worse. Authorities charged one of the tenants, 36-year-old Sarah Lilly, with felony arson. Meanwhile, rumors spread about an alleged dispute between the suspect and the landlord, along with claims that Lilly walked into a bar and bragged about starting the fire just minutes after igniting the blaze. Law enforcement declined to comment on any of the gossip, but Mindy Morelli, one of the residents who lost her home in the fire, told local station WIVB that the disaster could have been prevented, and many locals have echoed her sentiments. At the time the fire occurred, Lilly was facing a felony burglary charge in an unrelated case. She was accused of stealing from a store she had previously been banned from for shoplifting. Due to New York State's bail laws, which many people believe are overly generous toward criminal suspects, Lilly was released from custody amid the pending charges. The most recent arson charge was enough to keep her behind bars for the time being, but some community members believe that the fire never would have happened if authorities were able to keep her in custody on the shoplifting case. While Erie County Sheriff John Garcia did go into specifics on the case, he conceded that law enforcement received 63 911 calls about Lilly in the 6 months leading up to the fire. If convicted, she could face up to 25 years in prison. 9. The Sawmill Fire. Gender reveal parties weren't always a thing, but they've gained immense popularity in recent years, and it often seems as though each expecting couple's determined to prove that they're more creative than the last. Of course, things don't always go as planned, and sometimes the outcome of a gender reveal stunt is nothing short of catastrophic. One such instance happened in Arizona in April 2017, when 37-year-old Border Patrol agent and father-to-be Dennis Dickey shot at a target that was filled with a pink or blue material during a gathering near Green Valley, Arizona. The target was filled with a highly explosive material called tannerite, which, if the display had gone according to plan, would have filled the sky with a cloud of pink or blue residue. But Dickey got far more than he bargained for when he fired at the homemade contraption, which triggered a massive blaze that infamously came to be known as the Sawmill Fire. He called for help the moment he realized the fire had gotten out of control, but by then it was spreading so rapidly that even emergency responders were powerless to stop it. The flames engulfed a 45,000-acre area over the next week, as nearly 800 firefighters fought a seemingly losing battle to get the runaway blaze under control. They eventually managed to put it out at the cost of $8.1 million in taxpayer funds, which Dickey was ordered to pay back in full. He admitted to starting the fire and pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor violation of United States Forest Service regulations, which may seem light considering the amount of damage that was caused. But the 7-figure restitution and the lifelong embarrassment he's bound to suffer as a result of the incident are probably punishment enough on their own. 8. Livestreamer lights house on fire. A livestreamer from Japan made news headlines in 2015 when he accidentally burned his home down in one of his videos. During a live broadcast on a Japanese website called Nico Nico Duga, the unnamed man took a break from gaming to demonstrate his smoking skills. While showing off his lighter in what can only be described as an obviously careless way, he stopped to refill it with fluid. He wiped some fluid away with a tissue and threw it into a wastebasket behind him. The man then lit a match, which to his surprise burst entirely into flames. When he thought it had burned out, he tossed it into the same garbage can he'd thrown the lighter fluid-soaked tissue into. As you may have already guessed, the entire contents of the wastebasket quickly caught fire. The visibly panicked Livestreamer attempted to put the blaze out by smothering it with cardboard, but considering the fact that the cardboard is flammable, the flames continued to spread. He continued trying in vain to extinguish the fire as smoke filled the room. Throughout the ordeal, viewers tried telling him how to put the blaze out more effectively. At least one person suggested using a less incendiary item than cardboard to squash the flames, such as a futon. But the advice fell on deaf ears, and the situation only worsened. After several minutes, the man finally gave up and fled the apartment. According to reports, he made it out safely and nobody else was seriously injured, but it's probably safe to assume that the building suffered considerable damage, and that the streamer's neighbors probably weren't too happy with him after learning about the careless mistakes that led to the out-of-control blaze. 7. The Fancher Fire. Situated on the Allegheny Indian Reservation in western New York, the small city of Salamanca is home to around 6,000 residents. It's quiet today, but during its heyday, it was a bustling railroad hub and a boomtown of America's lumber industry. By the early 2000s, less than a handful of the once thriving production facilities headquartered in Salamanca was still operating. Among the few that were still hanging on was a factory called the Fancher Furniture Company. Its future was uncertain after the company changed hands in 2008, but fate made that decision 2 years later when the factory erupted into flames one afternoon. Authorities evacuated nearby residents while locals gathered in the parking lot of a nearby grocery store and watched in shock and awe as the blaze grew out of control. Within 2 hours of the first signs of the fire being spotted, both of the company's 4-story buildings were fully engulfed in flames. A massive black plume of smoke darkened the sky and could be seen for miles around. It was one of the worst, if not the worst fire that Cattaraugus County had seen in over half a century. By then, the factory had been vacant for over a year, begging the obvious question of how the fire started. But at the time, authorities were more worried about putting the flames out than allocating blame. The building was chock full of flammable materials, and its sprinkler system had been shut off months earlier. To make matters worse, high winds threatened to spread the blaze to neighboring homes and businesses, including a lumber yard located right next door. Thanks to the well-organized response among multiple fire departments, the fire was eventually put out. And while both buildings were completely destroyed, the outcome could have been much worse. That same evening, police arrested 6 young men on suspicion of arson. The suspects' names were never disclosed and the cases were handled quietly in court. But from what authorities have revealed, the nearly catastrophic blaze was a sobering example of how quickly things can get out of hand when you play with fire. 6. Homemade pest control goes horribly wrong. Just days before Thanksgiving in 2021, a homeowner in Montgomery County, Maryland, attempted to deal with an ongoing snake problem by smoking the reptiles out of their 10,000 square foot house. Hoping to end the infestation for good, they lit some coals in their basement and went about their usual day. Unbeknownst to the homeowner, they'd placed the hot coals near some combustible materials, causing the house to burst into flames when they were out running errands. No other household members were home when the fire began to spread, and by the time a passing motorist called 911, the flames had taken over the majority of the 3-story home. 75 firefighters responded to the scene, where they spent hours combating the blaze. The fire finally smoldered out the next morning, leaving an estimated $1 million worth of damage in its wake. Thankfully, nobody was injured, but things could have turned out much differently if anyone had been inside the house when it caught fire, and the destruction undoubtedly disrupted the household members' lives in major ways. The situation highlighted the dangers of using homemade pest control methods and the importance of calling a professional exterminator, which may seem like common sense to a lot of people. But this wasn't the first incident of its kind to occur, and it certainly won't be the last. Just 3 years earlier, in 2018, a man attempted to smoke bomb a family of skunks out of a crawl space in his Ferndale, Arizona home. He succeeded, but he also lit his house on fire and nearly burned it to the ground. In 2017, another homeowner destroyed his house in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, while trying to scare possums out of his yard. Using butane, he lit a pile of leaves on fire, hoping it would cause the rodents to flee. The flames quickly spread to his house, which was made out of wood, resulting in at least $50,000 of damage. Authorities condemned the property, forcing all 3 household members to move. So again, what's the lesson to be learned from all these disastrous yet avoidable incidents? The takeaway is simple. Leave pest control to the experts. It's less expensive than burning your house down. 5. Gail Metwally. What began as an ordinary afternoon in Elkton, Maryland in 2021 ended with multiple fire departments responding to a house fire that a woman was accused of setting on purpose. According to authorities, 47-year-old Gail J. Metwally lit several fires inside of the home while someone else was in it. She then went outside and made herself comfortable in a lawn chair while she watched the house go up in flames. Viral footage appeared to show Metwally arguing with another woman and a man on the front porch of the home shortly before the fire began. The confrontation was visibly heated and showed the man pouring water on Metwally. According to the video's narrator, he also threatened to beat her up. The clip then cut to the moment the house began to burn down and showed Metwally calmly reading a book while flames engulfed the structure. The person filming the video could be heard saying, "I cannot actually believe it, and she's just sitting there just chilling watching the house go up in flames. Oh my god." Officials later said that Metwally walked away from the scene a few minutes after sitting down. Around the same time, witnesses heard a woman screaming from inside the house. Quick-thinking bystanders rushed, followed the sound to a basement window, and helped the woman escape. As it turned out, she appeared to be the same woman who was seen in the viral video clip arguing with Metwally. Sheriff's deputies found Metwally nearby and booked her into custody on charges of first and second-degree attempted murder, arson, assault, 2 counts of malicious burning, 2 counts of malicious destruction of property, and 2 counts of reckless endangerment. The details of what led up to the alleged arson remain unclear, and the case appears to be ongoing. 4. Fireworks lead to forest fire. In 2018, an unfortunate young man from Oregon added his name to the growing list of people who've started forest fires by playing with flammable materials in the woods. According to authorities, the suspect threw fireworks into the Columbia River Gorge outside Portland, sparking a massive blaze that burned for months and devoured 47,000 acres of wilderness, an area roughly equivalent in size to Washington, D.C. Investigators identified the teen with help from tipsters and charged him with arson. His mother later told the Oregonian newspaper that her son didn't mean to cause a forest fire, and that the ordeal of going through court and being held criminally responsible for his actions was traumatic for him. But the young man did the right thing and owned up to his actions in court, and he apologized to everyone who was affected by the fire, including 2 households who lost their homes. The judge ordered him to pay $36.6 million in restitution, but acknowledged that the defendant would never be able to pay the full amount. He also sentenced the teen to 1,920 hours of community service and 5 years of probation. The young man's attorney argued that the restitution demand was cruel and unusual, but the court upheld the ruling. Under Oregon law, as long as he completes his probation, doesn't reoffend, and sticks to an agreed-upon payment schedule, the court can essentially forgive the debt after 10 years. 3. Pamela Crawley West. In late 2022, a 54-year-old Memphis woman named Pamela Crawley West was accused of setting her wheelchair-bound neighbor's house on fire with 7 people inside. According to the victim, who asked the media not to identify her, it all started when West brought her a hamburger. She said that she paid West back, but was a little short, which wouldn't seem like a big deal to most people, since the burger was only $2.50 to begin with. But West was allegedly outraged and said good luck getting out of the house to her neighbor before leaving and slamming the door behind her. According to an affidavit, West then set a bag of the woman's clothing on the porch and lit it on fire. Within moments, flames began to engulf the house. Luckily, the 4 adults and 3 children inside managed to escape. Authorities charged West with aggravated arson. Speaking with Fox 13, the suspect's daughter, Jennifer Johnson, accused the neighbors of being on drugs. She admitted that her mother likes to steal, that she probably stole the neighbor's dope, and that it probably led to the argument that occurred before the fire. But Johnson said that she didn't think West was guilty of arson because she knew there were kids in the house and would never hurt a child. In what can only be described as a truly dysfunctional rivalry between neighbors, the case appears to be ongoing. 2. The El Dorado Fire. Wildfires are a major and growing problem in California thanks to climate change, which has turned parts of the state into tinderboxes. Based on common sense alone, most people probably realize that playing with fire is the last thing anyone should be doing in California's forests during the summer. Still, some unfortunate souls have made poor decisions that have forced them to learn this lesson the hard way. One group of people joined that club during a gender reveal party over Labor Day weekend in 2020, when they decided it would be a good idea to light a smoke bomb among 4-foot-high wild grasses at El Dorado Ranch Park. The device malfunctioned, sparking an out-of-control blaze that quickly began to consume everything in its path. Efforts among partygoers to douse the flames with bottled water were futile, to say the least. The El Dorado Fire, as it came to be called, began in early September. It burned for more than 2 months and destroyed 22,744 acres of wilderness before it was finally extinguished in mid-November. In addition to the environmental devastation the fire left in its wake, 1 firefighter died and 13 people were injured. The fire forced more than 20,000 people out of their homes, destroyed 20 buildings, and shut roads down for months. Suppressing the blaze came at a cost of nearly $42.3 million, and taxpayers footed the bill. Authorities charged the expectant couple, corrections officers Refugio Manuel Jimenez Jr. and Angelina Rene Jimenez, with over 24 crimes in connection with the fire, including involuntary manslaughter for the death of the firefighter who lost his life combating the flames. The pair were also charged with 3 felony counts of recklessly causing a fire to an inhabited structure, 3 felony counts of recklessly causing a fire with great bodily injury, and 22 misdemeanor counts of recklessly causing a fire to the property of another. As of early 2023, the case was ongoing, and the defendants were on leave from their jobs while they faced what appeared to be a long road of court proceedings ahead of them. 1. An accidental pipe bomb. 56-year-old Pamela Cremea probably didn't think her life was in imminent danger when she attended a gender reveal party in Iowa in 2019. If anything, she was most likely in a festive mood and excited to learn about whether the parents-to-be were expecting a baby boy or a girl. Families and friends gathered outside the home in Knoxville for the big moment and pulled out their phones to record the reveal so they could share it on social media with guests who couldn't make it to the party. What was supposed to be a happy memory turned out to be gruesome and devastating when the explosive device that was meant to reveal the baby's gender malfunctioned, sending shards of metal flying into the air. Cremea was standing with other partygoers at what seemed like a safe distance of roughly 45 feet away when she was fatally struck by a piece of the shrapnel. In fact, the metal traveled up to 10 times that far, with some pieces landing 144 yards away from the explosion site. Luckily, nobody else was hurt, but one death was too many, and the day will forever be marked by tragic memories for everyone who was there. An investigation by the Marion County Sheriff's Office found that the family had experimented with various explosive materials in the days leading up to the party, in hopes of pulling off a dazzling, perfect pyrotechnic display. In an attempt to create a device that would shoot pink or blue powder into the air, they poured gunpowder into the bottom of a homemade stand that was welded onto a metal base. Over the gunpowder, they placed a board, and on top of the board, they put the colored powder. They taped the device's metal tubing, thinking it would force the powder to spew out of the top of the contraption, but instead, it caused an explosion inside of the tubing. Simply put, the family accidentally created a pipe bomb, and Cremea was killed instantly in the explosion.
Nine. Rebecca Grossman. 58-year-old California socialite Rebecca Grossman made a pretty good name for herself as the co-founder of the Grossman Burn Foundation, a nonprofit she founded with her husband, the renowned plastic surgeon, Dr. Peter H. Grossman. But public recognition of her philanthropy took a back seat in 2020, when she was accused of fatally mowing down two brothers during a street race in a Los Angeles neighborhood. According to prosecutors, Grossman drove into the victims as she flew down the street at speeds over 81 miles per hour, 130 kilometers per hour. She was allegedly racing against former Los Angeles Dodgers pitcher Scott Erickson after the two day drank at a bar. After hitting the brothers, Grossman allegedly failed to stop or go back to the scene to help the victims. She faces 2 murder and 2 manslaughter charges now. Her high-profile attorneys tried to get the murder charges dropped by arguing that Grossman was simply driving like a typical Californian when she hit the men. Deputy District Attorney Ryan Gould argued that the woman was driving in an area she was familiar with at the time of the crash, and that she should have known to expect pedestrians to be walking near. She also should have known exactly where the crosswalks were, according to Gould, and that she should have stopped near the intersection where the tragic incident happened. After skimming through over 1,000 pages of evidence, the judge overseeing the case ruled that it would go to trial sometime in 2023. If convicted, Grossman would face 34 years to life behind bars. 8. Yadira Rodriguez. During one day back in February 2017, an Aurora, Illinois police officer saw 2 vehicles street racing at incredible, estimated speeds of over 100 miles per hour, 161 kilometers per hour. So, the cop flipped his lights on and chased after the vehicles, pursuing one of the cars straight through a red light and staying on its tail until it finally pulled over. The driver, 28-year-old Yadira Rodriguez, allegedly showed a few signs of impairment. She was later booked on charges of street racing and driving under the influence. There was a passenger in the car with her at the time, but authorities refused to release any details about him. The arrest came about 4 years after Yadira pleaded guilty to a previous DUI charge, which she was fined around $2,000 for in the past. 7. Janica Palacios and Joshua Jones. While racing along a street in Klein, Texas, early in the morning one day in 2020, 2 drivers suddenly lost control of their vehicles and crashed, causing at least one of the cars to flip over. One of the passengers was left with life-threatening injuries. They were airlifted to the hospital, while the drivers, who've been identified as Janica Palacios and Joshua Jones, were treated for minor injuries. After getting medical care, Palacios and Jones were charged with street racing on the highway along with serious bodily injury. Jones faced an additional charge of intoxication assault. His bond was set high at $60,000, while the judge imposed a $20,000 bond against Palacios. The current status of these cases is unclear since information is limited. 6. Albana Kabashi. As the city of Philadelphia faced a troubling increase in hit-and-run crashes during 2019, a woman driving a 2003 Nissan 350Z lost control of her vehicle during a street race and crashed into a parked car. She also hit a pedestrian in the process. The driver, who's been identified by authorities as 21-year-old Albana Kabashi, left the scene of the crash. Thankfully, the pedestrian's injuries were non-life-threatening, and they survived. Law enforcement spoke with Kabashi in the days after the accident, but held off on filing charges pending the outcome of an ongoing investigation. Kabashi's attorney, Jordan Freeman, maintained that his client left the scene of the crime for her own safety. He told ABC6 and other local news stations that video footage of the accident showed several men surrounding Kabashi's car and advising her to leave the premises. Freeman said it was not only in the young woman's best interests to get away, but that it was, in his words, almost necessary. Kabashi was eventually charged with accident involving injury, reckless endangerment, and simple assault. It's unclear where her case currently stands. 5. Stephen Gabriel Seneca. While responding to a roadside accident in Deerfield Beach, Florida one day in early 2021, Broward County Sheriff's deputies discovered a crashed motorcycle. Its seriously injured driver, who was later identified as 28-year-old Liam Lexus Reyes, landed against a nearby fence after being thrown from his bike. He was pronounced dead at a nearby hospital not long after the incident. Based on evidence at the scene and several witness reports, detectives determined that a Dodge Charger Hellcat was driving right behind the motorcycle in the brief moments leading up to the crash. The two cars were allegedly weaving in and out of traffic on a road with a 45 mile per hour, 72.4 kilometer per hour speed limit, as they raced at high speeds around 130 miles per hour, 209 kilometers per hour. As the road curved, Reyes drove straight onto the grass as he lost control of his bike and was thrown. Police identified the driver of the Charger as 35-year-old Stephen Gabriel Seneca. He reportedly called 911 and stayed at the scene until law enforcement got there. In addition to being accused of vehicular homicide, racing, reckless driving, property damage, speeding in excess, and other charges, Seneca was charged with child abuse for allegedly having his daughter in his car during the race. In his first court appearance, his attorney claimed that Seneca stayed about 70 feet, 21.3 meters, behind the motorcycle. The lawyer argued that while the incident was a tragedy, Reyes made the choice to drive in a very, very, very reckless manner, and that his decision is not entirely Seneca's fault. Florida prison records show that nobody by Seneca's name is currently in jail, but the status of the rest of the case is unclear. 4. Manuel Antonio Cerrone and Jada Ballin. Shortly before dawn in Raleigh, North Carolina, one day in 2023, a street race between a 2019 Mercedes-Benz E300 and a 2020 Chevy Camaro went horribly wrong. The vehicles were speeding down Interstate 440 when the driver of the Mercedes, later identified as 33-year-old William Ortiz, somehow lost control of his car and veered right into oncoming traffic. He managed to hit a Chevy Traverse SUV, seriously injuring a mother and her child. The driver of the Camaro, 30-year-old Manuel Antonio Cerrone, also lost control. He ultimately drove off the roadway and crashed into a tree. Ortiz died at the scene, while Cerrone escaped on foot, leaving his Camaro behind. He was taken into custody just 1 week later on charges of involuntary manslaughter, felony hit and run causing serious injury or death, and misdemeanor death by vehicle. In another street racing incident that happened in Raleigh about a month later, the drivers of a 2007 Honda Accord and a 2015 Chevy Malibu were neck and neck around 2:30 in the morning. The woman behind the wheel of the Accord, 24-year-old Jocelyn Morrison, lost control though and sideswiped the Malibu before heading onto a grass median and across an intersection. According to a police news report, the vehicle hit a tree, spun, and then struck another tree before coming to a complete stop. Morrison was taken to the hospital, where she later died from her injuries. The driver of the Malibu, 25-year-old Jada Ballin, managed to keep steady control of her car and stopped along the road. She was initially charged with felony serious injury by vehicle, but the charge was upgraded to felony death by vehicle after Morrison died. The incident is still under investigation. 3. Robert Miller III and Keith Jones. In a street racing tragedy that claimed a life in December 2022, the driver of a 2022 Genesis sedan lost control along a busy road in Des Moines, Iowa, while driving at speeds over 100 miles per hour, 161 kilometers per hour. The driver crossed over the median line and crashed into a Honda Accord with a 38-year-old mom and 2 children inside, cutting the car in two. He then proceeded to ram into a Chevy Equinox with a 40-year-old woman in it. One of the passengers in the Honda died, while the driver and the other passenger survived. The dark-colored BMW SUV that the Genesis was racing during the incident continued driving. Authorities charged the driver of the Genesis, 35-year-old Robert Miller III, with several homicide charges, failure to maintain control, and excessive speed. 4 days later, police arrested the driver of the SUV, 47-year-old Keith Eric Jones, on suspicion of homicide by vehicle and serious injury by vehicle. According to court documents, witnesses claimed that they saw Jones getting out of his SUV near the crash site and looking back before fleeing. At the time of the accident, he was out of jail on a $50,000 bond for a separate abuse case. While law enforcement managed to track down Jones, his SUV remained missing, and authorities appealed to the public for help finding it. It's unclear whether they were successful in locating the vehicle. The deadly incident came only 4 months after another out-of-control street race that ended with 2 cars crashing into 4 Des Moines homes. Both drivers allegedly ditched their cars and fled the scene on foot. Amazingly, no injuries were reported from that day. Local resident Dawn White told local news station WOIDT that she was grateful her family was alive after one of the cars barreled right into her living room. She warned drivers to stop treating the road like a racetrack and to slow down for the safety of everyone. According to the Des Moines City Council, there has been a disturbing citywide spike in street racing since the start of COVID-19. In 2021, the council passed a new law making it illegal to attend street races in hopes of curbing the problem. Sadly, this unlawful form of entertainment is alive and well, and continues to put lives in danger every day. 2. Patrick Ewan. Denise Harris was at work in Nashville, Tennessee one night in early 2023 when she heard a loud boom from the road. She went outside and saw a Honda sedan sitting in the road, crushed up like a soda can. Driver, 34-year-old Jacob Barnhart, died from his injuries. He was on his way to pick up his children when the crash happened. Barnhart's car was hit by a Dodge Charger Hellcat that authorities believe was drag racing. According to Metro Nashville Police, the driver, 31-year-old Patrick Ewan, lost control while traveling at high speeds of over 100 miles per hour, 161 kilometers per hour, and barreled across the road into heavy oncoming traffic. Footage provided by witnesses allegedly shows the Hellcat crashing straight into Barnhart's Honda, before also striking a Toyota pickup truck. After receiving treatment for minor injuries, Ewan was taken to jail on a vehicular homicide charge. His bail was set at nearly $75,000. Witnessing the aftermath of the accident left Denise Harris shaken and frustrated with the senseless deaths that are often caused by street racing. During her interview with the local news station WKRN, she said that she thinks it's time for people to wake up and realize that if they want to race their car, they should sign up to be a NASCAR driver. 1. Dante Terrell Chapel Young. Christmas Day will never be the same for the family and friends of a young 24-year-old nursing student named Eliza Oaxaca, who was fatally hit during a street takeover in Hyde Park, Los Angeles during 2022. According to local news outlet KTLA, a street takeover often consists of several cars that arrive in a coordinated manner at intersections and along highways. The vehicles then block traffic to speed and show off dangerous stunts like drifting. These displays are typically accompanied by so-called flash mobs of hundreds of spectators who gather nearby to watch the show. Miss Oaxaca was standing on a street corner with a group of people not long after 9 o'clock in the evening when she was suddenly hit by a Chevy Camaro. She was quickly rushed to a nearby hospital where she later died from her injuries. Apparently, the driver fled the scene. Videos that were turned into police showed what looked like 6 or 7 other victims who were hurt in the hit and run. In the footage, uninjured bystanders could be seen helping those who got hit. At least 3 appeared to be critically injured. 3 weeks later, the Los Angeles County District Attorney George Gascon announced the arrest of the alleged Camaro driver. 27-year-old Dante Terrell Chappell Young. He was taken into custody in New Mexico and extradited to California on 1 count of murder and 1 count of hit-and-run driving ending in death. The highly publicized tragedy sparked pleas for authorities to take action against street takeovers in LA. Activist and author Earl O'Farry Hutchinson, who is the head of the city's Urban Policy Roundtable Open Mic Forum, saw the accident firsthand. He urged Mayor Karen Bass and the city council to declare a state of emergency over street takeovers, which he said would empower law enforcement and devote resources to fighting against the deadly trend. Thanks for watching. Would you rather be forced to move out of your house for 6 months or be without a car for the same amount of time? Let me know in the comments below.